This is Blender 7, and what we're going to talk about is textures. If I go to render this, we're basically picking up where we left off. Last time I have a basic scene, I have different elements, and what we're going to talk about is how to add different materials and textures. So first thing I'm going to do is let's start with the wall. So I have the wall selected, and I'll go, and right now I don't have a name for this, so let's rename this wall and give it a color. I'll give it kind of a dark green, and I'm going to change the HSV. Like I said, I prefer using that over some of the other things. Knock the value down, etc. Okay, let's render this out. Okay, so now we've got green wall, pretty simple. Now the thing that's looks fake on this is it's a perfectly smooth surface, so what we're going to do is we're going to explore adding textures. The texture button's to the right of the material button, so right here, and by default there's nothing here, so I'm going to add a new texture, and I call this just wall. And you can see that there's different types of patterns depending on the drop down. For this one we're just going to use the stucky, and so we have the stucky added, and I'll go through, and at this point if we go to render this, you'll see we got this crazy surface. Now the question is why the heck is that happening? If we go and we actually pull up the properties, and up here you can see that what's happening right now is this preview, this material with this color is being added to the diffuse color channel, which we don't want. So let's add it to the normal, and now let's render it out. And now you'll see it actually, the black and white creates the illusion of depth. Now it looks like you have liquid walls right now, so that's not going to work. But what we can do is we can go back to the actual size, and let's drop it down to 0.01, and now go to render out. And now you can see it's a lot smaller, and the bump height, which is how much the bump is a little too high, so let's knock this down. Just keep on going, maybe 0.1, and let's render this out and see what happens. You can see even at this point it's still too high. Let's do 0.01, render this out, and if you look kind of close, there's a subtle bump now, which is usually what would happen if you painted a wall a couple times. It just helps to break up the space, and it keeps it from looking too pure, too clean. So let's select the glass on the lamp next. Oh. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color. For starters, I'm going to make this a, let's say, a blue, kind of light blue, knock the saturation up a little, and the value. And I'm going to add a texture to this, so I'll go down and zoom up, and you can see now we're a different material, so we have a different name appearing. And actually, let me change this over to lamp and add a new texture, and we're just going to use the default clouds, and you can see at this point we're getting that purplish color. So I'm going to go down and change the RGB intensity to a dark blue, and let's knock the value down and keep the saturation up. And now if we go to render and we look at this, now you can see that all of a sudden we get something that looks kind of like it's stained glass. Now with the metal we can do similar things. Right now the metal has a reflectivity to it, and it's pretty consistent. Things that would show up on metal would be dust, scratch. Every time you touch it, your oils will change the sheen, the patina on it. So let's just go and do a little bit of modification to the actual material for the lamp metal. So once again, I'm just going to start by adding a new material, and let's just call this metal detailing. And I'm just going to keep the clouds, again, just so we can kind of see the difference. And I can come down, and instead of impacting the color, I'm going to do the ray mirror. And let's go render this out and see what we get. And you can see this is pretty extreme, and that's because it's an influence of 1. So I'm actually going to drop this down to 0.1, and now let's render this out. And it's much more subtle, and it's actually a little hard to see, but it'll help kind of break it up, and it won't look as even. So let's move on to the frame. So I'm going to select the frame, and I'm going to add a texture to this as well. Now, instead of using a procedurally generated texture, I'm going to create a new one. So I'll just call this poster. And instead of doing cloud, I'm going to do image. And at this point, okay, now that I have the image, scroll down and I'm going to do open. And I have pre-made textures available, and I have a poster. Double click that, and you'll see we already have it loaded up. And if I render this out, you'll see that we have a poster. Now it's a little dark, and that's because when we created this material, because it was based on reflection, we actually got rid of the intensity. So if I increase that and render it again, now it's a little bit brighter and we can actually read and we can see it. And once again, this is a lower resolution just so it renders quickly. So let's move on to the ceiling. And grab the ceiling, and I'm going to change a couple things. I'm going to make it more like a metal. We did this last tutorial, so I'm going to make this a dark, highly saturated orange, and let's make it a little darker than that. And then I'm going to come into specularity and make that a high saturation orange. The specularity on that, and now we start to get our sheen on the roof, on the ceiling. And then the next thing we're going to add is we're going to add a texture. So let's go up, now that we have this material selected, we're going to do a new texture, and I'm going to switch this over to being a image. And let's go in and open up the ceiling tile, and at this point you can see we're getting this image. Now the ceiling tile, we want it to map multiple times, so at this point we need to adjust it. So right now you can see the size is 111. If I change this to size 5, 5, and 5, now it changes the mapping a little. And then the other thing is we don't want this to actually be on color, we want this to be on normal. And you can see all of a sudden we're starting to get something that looks kind of a little bit more accurate, and you can adjust this. Also, for some reason, if it's going the wrong way, you can do a negative, which will basically come in and invert it. So you can do some different changes here and there, but this should be good enough. And also we could do it with the specularity, which will just push it a little bit more. And also that'll help to make this look much more realistic. So now if we do this, it's going to be a little subtle to see, but we're actually starting to get detailing that shows up here as well. The table's the next thing I want to move on to. I'll go back to the camera for this. We'll select the table, and I'll do the same thing again of adding another material. Now this one already had one for some reason, so if I hit the plus I can get rid of it. If I go to do a new one, I'll call this wood. Now the thing you don't want to use is there's actually a procedural wood, and if you go to render out with that, it looks pretty horrific. So the recommendation is to actually use the texture instead of the procedurally generated wood. In most 3D programs, the wood usually looks pretty bad. So we'll switch from type wood, we'll take it over to image, and we'll go open an image, and then I have a seamless wood texture right here, and you can see when we render this out that we have it, and it looks pretty good here, but it's lined up here wrong and then on the frame. So let's work with the table first. Now in order to modify how this is happening, we need to change what's called the UV mapping. So right now the texture is coming down, it's getting projected, and it's coming straight down. So what we need to do is we need to get the material so that we can explicitly define what the side's going to look like. So in order to do that, we want to open up the UV image editor, which is actually the same thing we use for the rendering, and we want to pull up the wood texture. And now we have the table selected. We want to go into edit mode, mesh, UV wrap, and we just do an unwrap, and you can see the instant we do that, it basically took each face and made it exactly the size of this material. So we're going to select this face, which you can see is a little too big, and now I'm going to do scale, and I'm just going to scale on the x-axis and then move it wherever I'd like to. And now if I render at this point, you're not going to see any change, and that's because we need to change the mapping type. So right now this is the coordinates is generated, which takes the texture and projects it in the entire space. So we're going to switch this over to UV, And the instant we do that, now we have this properly oriented, and it looks a lot more realistic. So now we're going to do the same thing with the frame, because the frame's a little funny at this point. So the easiest thing to do on the frame is to basically switch the view. And because we have no UV coordinates, you can see that the frame isn't selected. Now if I go into select the frame and I go into edit mode, you're going to see that this is still a curve, so I need to convert it before I do anything else. So object, convert to, mesh from curve. Now we change that, and then now I can go into edit mode, and I'm going to border select and grab all of these. Now the thing that we want to do at this point is we want to create UVs, and there's different ways. The unwrap just basically takes the faces and makes them all the same size, which isn't going to work for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a thing called projection. So we're going to do mesh, unwrap, and project from view. And you'll see the instant it does that, it basically takes a snapshot of the orientation and puts it on. So I can rotate this, hold down Control to constrain it, and scale it up a bit, and use grab to move it, and line it up, and now we have that sampling some wood, and that's what it'll appear. So it's kind of a similar technique. So now we'll select the bottom one, do the same thing again, mesh, UV, project from view, and let's pull the image back to wood, and rotate it around, hold down Control, scale it up, and relocate it to another piece of wood so it has a little bit more variety. And then let's finish this up by doing this one, mesh, UV, project from view, zoom in, pull up the image, and this one's just a matter of scale and move, and then this one, control, wood, mesh on V, project from view. It's a little big. Okay, so there we go. I get out of edit mode, and you can see now we have the grain and the orientation. Go back to camera view, and go to render this again. And now we have the wood properly oriented in both of those views. So now we have the table done. Let's go and look at a couple other techniques. Let's zoom in and look at the pencil. And all we're going to do with the pencil is we're just going to modify the body of the pencil. So I have the pencil selected, and we have the pencil material. While this is selected, I'm going to add a texture to it. And this is going to be an image map. And I'm going to go down and open up, and I have another material that has an alpha channel which defines transparency. And if we go to pencil and zoom in, you'll see that what we have is basically your standard text that you would find on a number 2 wooden pencil. So we want to change how that is applied onto this material. So we're going to need to adjust the UV. So we're going to take the coordinates, switch over to UV, and we don't have any UVs at this point, so we're not going to see anything. And we're going to use this project from view option. So we will basically, we want to try to get this as close as we can to being straight and aligned. So this is kind of, I would consider somewhat of a hack, but it'll work fine for what we're doing here. So we're going to do object, I'm going to edit mode, mesh, UV wrap from view. Then you see we have our UV, so we rotate up, rotate and get that set up, and we want to go the other way. And then scale, make it bigger, and then move it around. And now you see we have the pencil 2 that's on there, and we can spend more time adjusting, but that kind of gets the idea across. So now we have text on the pencil, and if we want to push this a little further, we can also go in and not only apply it to the color, we could also apply it to the normal as well, and it'll actually emboss the text. Or if we make this negative, it'll push it up and it'll actually make it look like it's raised ink on top of the surface. So you can do some pretty neat things just with the basics, and like I said, this is just an alpha channel. That's